Good afternoon, evening, morning, whenever you are watching this. I am recording your review for Exam 1, Spring 2024 for Chem 230. I will go through this PowerPoint and then take any questions you have in class on Wednesday. Just as a reminder, I will give you that periodic table with the equation sheet. I gave you that day 1 of class. It is available on Canvas for you to look at and work through, and let me know if you have any questions about that. Please note that I will give you a clean version of the periodic table out of fairness for absolutely everybody. I don't want anybody to have anything accidentally on their equation sheet for them to give them an unfair advantage associated with anything from there. What you must know and must absolutely have memorized is the metric system of conversion factors. That is not something new that I'm telling you just today. That is something I have told you since I introduced the metric system, so make sure you know what those conversion factors are. You will be given the standard to standard conversions as well as the standard to metric conversions, but you do not get the metric to metric conversions. Okay. So let's start back at the beginning of what we talked about. At one of the first lecture slides that we talked, or one of the first lectures that we had, was to differentiate a chemical versus a physical change, a chemical property versus a physical property, intensive versus extensive properties, qualitative and quantitative, and then we also discussed precision and accuracy. So a chemical change versus a physical change. A chemical change is when you change, and your definition within those. I'm going to leave those for now. We had a quiz on that content where I had you identify chemical, physical, and that kind of stuff. Look back at that quiz. It was either quiz 1 or quiz 1. Intensive and extensive properties. An extensive property is based on the quantity of what you have. An intensive property is something you can look up on a table. A qualitative property depends on the quality of what you're working with, so it often describes color or some feature of it. A quantitative property has a numerical value associated with it. And then precision and accuracy. Looking at the classifications of what you have, there will be a list of different things, and I'm going to ask you to identify it as a mixture, a compound, a heterogeneous mixture, or a homogeneous mixture within there. And I've included the flow chart from your lecture notes to talk you through and help remind you of how to figure out which of those is which as we move forward. Okay. The next thing to look at is the phase changes of matter. The 3 common phases that have been discussed are solids, liquids, and gases, and you need to know the phase changes between interchanging between them. There are 6 terms that you need to know. There was a quiz question on this one as well, so make sure you go back and review that quiz question, which will help you with the content for exam 1 for this question specifically. Significant figures have been huge within what we've talked about for this semester. Remember the rules. For the addition and subtraction rules, it's the number of places plus a decimal or the least significant figure within there, whether that's in the tens or hundredths place, tens or hundreds, or tenths or hundredths place. So make sure you understand that. Multiplication, division, it is the quantity of significant figures, and so you count that very differently of the addition and subtraction. Remember your rules within there. There will be a question on there that says, do this math, round to the appropriate number of significant figures. You do not get credit for doing the math correctly, although you must do the math correctly to get the significant figure points associated with that. Again, quiz and in-class assignment based off of that. Make sure you refresh the rules to make sure you're doing within there. The other thing I will say with significant figures is if indicated within the question, you need to round your answer to the appropriate number of significant figures. Anytime you do any sort of calculations within what you have, and we're going to talk about unit conversions here in a little bit, anytime we talk about those, you need to round your answer to the appropriate number of significant figures within there. Conversion factors have infinite sig figs in there, so when I'm writing the question of converting from A to B within the problem, I think about how many points I can assign to the question and the relative partial credit of what I can do and break that down within there. So when you're doing your unit conversions, there is a point for getting the correct numerical answer. There's a point for rounding correctly. There's a partial credit, not a point necessarily. There's partial credit for including the units. And then if something goes wrong within the problem, there's also partial credit for the setup that you have. If I can follow your setup and I see you make a small mistake here or there, then I can award more partial credit based on what you're given or what you have given versus or not. And we can go from there. Okay. So with the conversion factors, you must have the metric system memorized. There is nothing around that. Approximately 1/3 of your exam is conversion factors. Some of those are metric, some of those are not, but you do need to have the metric system memorized. It is all on the base 10 unit. It is all consistent and standard throughout. The one nice thing or the one unique factor about the metric system is it does apply across 3 different base units, the distance, the volume, and the mass associated with things. So it's one set of conversion factors instead of 3 like the standard system. The standard system, you will be able to do all of the problems that I assign using the conversion factors that are on the back of the periodic table that I will give you. The temperature conversions are shown on the slide here. Those are also on the back of your periodic table. Think about what you want to get to in terms of your final answer within there. If you're solving for Celsius, you're going to use the if you're solving for Celsius, you're going to use the second equation there because that will give you your answer in Celsius. If you're solving for Fahrenheit, you're going to use the bottom one. The only one I don't have differentiating equations for is from Celsius to Kelvin and Kelvin to Celsius, but that's a simple addition, and so I didn't feel the need to rewrite that equation. Density is also another conversion factor that we need to know. This was a virtual lecture that was provided for you, but really it's just a different conversion factor. It is mass per unit volume, and you can solve for the density, you can solve for the mass, or you can solve for the volume. But it's just a conversion factor to use. Make sure that you're following your units through with and everything from there. Okay. And then the last thing we talked about is isotope and atomic history, isotopes and atomic history. We will not be talking about the relative abundance on this exam. I'm saving that for exam 2, but you need to know the history of the atom, know the people, what they contributed, and the relative experiment that helped them figure that out. And everything that goes with that and work through those. The 4 people that you do need to be concerned about are listed on the slide there: Dalton, Thomson, Millikan, and Rutherford. And then the last bit of content-specific information I'm going to provide for this exam is you need to be able to determine the number of protons, neutrons, and electrons given partial information. So course assignment 3, the whole front page of that had proton, neutron, and electron information on it. So make sure that you know how to work through that. The table that I will have you fill out is similar to in class number 3 as well as quiz 3 content that's indicated there. The table on the bottom of the slide here shows you the electrons, protons, and neutrons, their relative charge, and their relative masses. Protons and neutrons each have a mass unit of 1. Neutrons are neutral, protons are positively charged, and electrons are negatively charged and located outside of the nucleus. The best ways to study for this exam, I've answered this for a few students individually, but I wanted to make sure that all students were aware of the best practices and the best way to succeed within my course. Your best study resource for you is my old quizzes and old in-class assignments. Those are questions that I have authored specifically with this content in mind to help bring you up to speed within what I want you to know and remember within there. The lecture notes are the next best thing, but they don't give you actual practical applications of what you're working with, so that's why the quizzes and exams are a little bit better. But within the notes, any sample problems I had within there are actually really good resources to work with. The homework assignments are okay to study from. The difficulty with the homework assignments is I had to pull from a pool of pre-existing questions, so they're not always the way that I would specifically have them worded, but I am not able to edit them and fix them for what I want. So the content within the homework assignments are good. The way the questions are worded sometimes it may or may not be. Still good practice for you. The homework assignments I really like because it gives you instant feedback. If you're struggling with a question, it gives you a hint on where to go within it. And it is also linked directly to a textbook that has, if you're struggling with this type of question right here, here's the exact paragraph in the textbook that you need to read that will help you understand the content that you're working towards. Okay. Again, make sure you have the metric system memorized. If you need help, come find me, find the tutors, or find any other chemistry faculty member for assistance. The tutoring office is staffed Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and except for Fridays, they quit at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Nobody's here late on Friday anyway. We're not going to have the students staff that and waste hours that way. Find the tutors, find me, get help sooner than later. If there's something that you don't understand, make sure that I can help you or the tutors can help you as we move forward. Okay. Study little quizzes and class assignments. Use your time wisely. Sometimes students have a hard time completing the exam as written. When I write the exam and write the answer key, it takes me about 15 minutes to write it. I understand that I'm not a student learning the content, but the general rule of thumb for faculty members in general is if the exam takes you 15 to 20 minutes, it's an appropriate length exam for students to complete within the 15-minute time frame. Okay. I will put the clock up on the projector like I usually do so you can monitor your time, and I will try to give a few time prompts as we get close to the end from there. The other faculty members are more than willing to help. The chemistry tutors are willing to help. Get help, get help, get help. That's all I can say. I'm going to say that more often, and hopefully maybe some students will take that into consideration. Finally, as you are taking the exam, make sure you are rounding your answer to the appropriate number of significant figures. There's lots of partial credit assigned to significant figures within this exam. As you are working through the problems, make sure to show the work on the problems that you're doing so that if you use your calculator incorrectly, remember a conversion factor incorrectly, or do something small and silly, I can give you most of the credit on the problem for the work that you have shown within there. And then finally, one of the biggest things that I look at and look for is numerical answers absolutely must have units associated with the answer. Do not give me a number with no units associated with it. It doesn't mean anything to me, and so that is important for me to have you know and understand. Exam 1 is scheduled for Friday, February 2nd during normal class time, and you will have just your 50 minutes to complete your exam. I will give you a clean copy of the exam, a clean copy of the periodic table, and then at your desk, you're only allowed your calculator and your writing utensil from there. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, please come find me sooner than later. Happy studying.